Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. Colin Kaepernick was all over the news a few years ago because he chose to kneel during the pre-game national anthem. But he isn't the first athlete to do so. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was a successful NBA player when he did the same thing. We sit down with Mahmoud to find out what led to that moment and how his life has changed ever since. Mahmoud, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here.
No, the honor is mine. Thank you.
Now, I want to talk to you about something that you've, probably mentioned many, many times, but, your big decision, you were with the Denver Nuggets, you were, at the top of your game, and then you decided not to stand for the national anthem. Can you tell me the reasoning behind that? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I began to read a lot after becoming a Muslim. And I wasn't a big reader at the time, and I was introduced to a lot of different authors. Of course, the Seerah of the Prophet of Islam, Tafsir, but I began to be introduced to Noam Chomsky's Howard Zinn, all of those authors, and they were talking a lot about foreign policy and domestic policy, and there were a lot of things that I was just totally unaware of. Mm-hmm. And listening to, what Allah is telling us when He says, enjoying what is good or forbid what is evil, or some would say institutionalize justice and deconstruct the institutionalization of injustice. It just didn't make sense to me that what the flag is supposed to represent is not representing that. And I couldn't see myself standing up for that symbol. Mm-hmm. I felt it was diametrically opposed to what I believed in. It was like maybe 4 to 6 months, the previous season, that I just stopped standing, but I wasn't.
You just stay in the locker room. Right?
No, that's incorrect.
No,
yeah,
okay.
They keep saying that. No, I would come out, but I would sometimes stretch during the anthem, getting ready for the game, or sometimes I would stand and just face in a different direction.
So it took a while for people to notice then.
Yes.
Reporters.
Right, because I was still trying to figure the world out around me, but I knew it was something I didn't want for myself. And then the assistant GM came to me one day, said that there was a reporter that noticed. Did I want to say anything about it? I said, of course. Because at that time I decided pretty much that, I have to start taking positions. There's no such thing as neutrality. Mm-hmm. And these are things that we talk about on the bus, on the plane. And so I didn't think anything of it. And once I had that conversation with him, the next day in shoot-around prior to a game, the media was there, and they asked me the question, what I think about the flag, and I gave my answer, and that I thought it represented tyranny and oppression. But am I saying everything in America is bad? No, there's good that exists, but wherever the bad is, even as a Muslim, if it's in Saudi Arabia, we don't stand for it, which was balanced. Mm-hmm. But of course, the media focused on tyranny and oppression, tyranny and oppression. One thing led to another, went global. I was fine, and then history.
The fans went crazy as well, right? You must have heard a lot of slurs against you.
Of course.
A lot of backlash.
Yeah, of course. But that was only when I was when I went on the road. When I was in Chicago, when I was in Indiana, all type of things. But surprisingly, when I came back to Denver, and I'm thinking, okay, they're gonna go crazy. Nothing.
How about your teammates? Like, how did your teammates respond?
My teammates were very supportive.
Okay.
Because we talk about these issues all the time. The difference, a lot of people in private, they agree with a lot. The difference is not everyone is willing to go public with it. Mm-hmm. And so Dale Ellis, for example, when I didn't play that game, he was literally, if you look back at the footage, he was turned total opposite direction in protest. Mm-hmm. A lot of players, Dikembe, Jalen Rose, came out and said some positive things. People throughout the league also. Of course, you're going to have people that don't agree, and that's fine. But my teammates were very supportive, and they knew me. And then the people in Denver, I'm a people's person, so I'm constantly out in public. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons why there was no one that booed or anything, because...
what about Muslims? How did Muslim leaders respond?
It was.
I guess they weren't very happy with you.
It was a mixture. It was a mixture.
Because they might have thought, there's this whole perception that Muslims are unpatriotic, and you played into that, right?
Yeah. Well, it was a mixture. There was this divide with, and I hate using words like immigrant and all that, but there was a divide between the immigrant community and the African American community.
Yeah, I know.
Because we have a particular struggle that they didn't have. And then sometimes too, I get it, coming to the country, you're trying to
Trying to fit
assimilate,
in. Yes,
and you don't want problems. But the masjid that I was going to on Parker Road, called Abu Bakr Masjid, definitely wasn't supportive. And but that's okay. That's how you grow. We have our difference of opinion, but it was a mixture. It was a mixture.
Do you think what you did made a difference?
I think when we make decisions like that, it's always making a difference. How much of a difference? Only Allah knows. I mean, the fact that you look 20-something years later and you see a person like Kaepernick taking similar stances.
Yeah.
Even the position that I took, there was always somebody before me that influenced that position. Whether it was Paul Robeson, whether it was Muhammad Ali, whether Muslim or not, whether it was Martin Luther King, people that you read about that stood for something. Yeah.
Would you stand for the national anthem today?
I don't.
You don't?
I still don't.
You still don't?
Yeah,
And what would your advice be to other people? Do you think other people should stand for the national anthem, or should they protest?
Well, they have to make that choice. But I don't agree with it. And especially when they came out in light of the fact of the third stanza, and that it had nothing to do with us. And even if they didn't have the third stanza, when you look at the history, not just in the past, but even contemporary history, we don't think it had us in mind, or it have us in mind right now. So I'm not a fan of it. I think they should take it out of sporting events. There's this thing in America called the separation of church and state, and oftentimes when it comes to sports, they want to separate politics from sports. Well, the flag in and of itself is a political symbol. It's a contradiction as far as I'm concerned. Get it out. So I just think it's bad business. Overseas, there's a lot of places that don't even play the national anthem before the game.
What you've done is really commendable, because you acted on conscience, even at a time when people were against you, and you held to it. Because you felt that there was, a bigger cause. You were fighting injustice or speaking out in support of justice. So what's your advice for another individual in that situation, or an individual who feels powerless, perhaps, feels like, if they act in a certain way, other people might be against them? What would be your advice to them?
Man, so much that can be said. Generally speaking, look, you have to follow your heart. If there's something if there's a cause that you feel attached to, that you have a heart for, I mean, I know it's easier said than done. Don't allow anyone to discourage you away from standing up for your principles. This life is short, and for me, the worst thing is to die and having regrets, knowing that there was something that I saw, something that I could have said something about, did something about. Because we all know there's this saying that wherever you go, there you are. All right, you can't run from yourself. You know that if you were a coward, you know that if there was something you should have said something about, did something about, you didn't do it, and so you have to live with yourself. And so I would say educate yourself as much as you can, and I think also surrounding yourself around people that share your views, because you find strength. They do studies all the time. If you're out of shape, you want to get in shape, hang around somebody that's in shape. If you're not smart, hang around smart people. Why? There's a pattern. There's a language associated with it, and it rubs off after a while. If you want to be moral, if you want to be an activist, hang around those people. You draw strength from that. And so I would say those things. But
what about somebody who comes from a difficult circumstance? Because you have experience with that. I mean, you came from Mississippi. Your mother was a single mother.
Even more reason.
Yeah.
Even more reason. Look, man, we know. What if Allah says in Quran? He says, "I want to favor those who are being oppressed and to make them leaders." When you look at
but sometimes there are extra challenges that make it difficult.
Of course, it always is. Whether you have, whether you're affluent or whether you under straitened circumstances.
Yeah.
It's always tough to take a position that's not popular. You look at the history. That's why you have few people who have done so in the history, and most people do the opposite of that. But I will say this: that once you do it, there's nothing like that freedom that you feel that you took a position. And even if you play the role and you don't take a position, you're going to get hit. You're going to get hit. So it's like Arundhati Roy. She said, once you see something, you can't unsee it. To be silent, to say nothing, is just as political an act. Either way, you're accountable. So I'm like, so if I'm silent, I'm just as accountable as if I spoke out. Well, I might as well go for broke, because either way it goes, you're not going to be satisfied.
Yeah.
So I want to live it down my terms.
Do you have a particular message that you want to give to young Black Muslims who might be watching you?
I think for me, one of the toughest things that I had to overcome is, I think the most damaging thing that when it comes to us in particular, and I talk about this a lot, is controlling your story, understanding your history and your culture, because that affected me. That affected me so much growing up, and I don't have time to get into it all right now. But you know, you hear things. You hear people talk about genocide, right? But I think the worst thing you can do to a person is to deny them a history of who they are and a history of their culture, because you're always susceptible to someone else's interpretation of who you are, and they don't always have your best interests at heart. And so really trying to locate and find out who you are, what you want to become, and own that. And like I say, living down your own terms. It's easier said than done. You know, Frederick Douglass said, you know, knowledge doesn't befit a man to be a slave. So once you educate yourself and then you enlighten yourself, it gives you a sense of freedom unlike anything else. And so I would definitely, some of the same things I said earlier, really work toward doing that. Surround yourself around people that are moving toward what you're trying to move toward. And try to get to that point in your life, and I think we all try to where you're living and dying with a free conscience and a free soul.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
Mahmoud, thank you for joining us on Let the Quran
you.
Speak. I really
appreciate it. Thank you.